So to break it down in less than a minute and a half, this camera has a sub 2K video sensor. That's less than 2K video sensor. So it is not a true 4K camera. It is not a true 4K camera. It is a sub 2K being upscaled to 4K video files. But there's nothing in there that's 4K. It's sub 2K being upscaled to 4K video. And as they admit in the manual, that is a 2 megapixel sensor, it cannot take 40 megapixel photos as claimed. It is a 2 megapixel camera upscaling the photos to 40 megapixel, which is just a mess. In no way, shape or form can these be relied upon to be 40 megapixels. They are not. So with that being said, if you don't want to watch the whole of this video, because it does go into quite a bit of depth and we show some examples towards the end which are probably worth looking at, I will put them in just now very briefly so you can see the quality differences, and then if you want to watch the 30-minute video then you can, but this is just everything you need to know in a minute and a half. So to sum it up, the T5 is a bit mushy and average in day, but very good at night with good grayscale rendering. The M7PRO is quite sharp in the day. It's a good quality image in the day, but oh boy, does it fall apart in low light and at night time. It's really noisy, bad grayscaling, introduces loads of unusual pixels which don't have any representation to the image at night, whereas the T5 is a nice smooth image, good grayscaling, absolutely just the all-round night winner. But if you want the detailed review, here we go. On the left is a true 4K Sony AX100, in the middle is the Boblov T5, and on the right is the Boblov M7PRO. When they're zoomed out, this is just normal 100%, doesn't look too bad. But when you start zooming in, then you start to see where things are really breaking up. The AX100, impeccable. The Boblov M7PRO, fuzzy because it's upscaled footage. And the T5, yeah, very poor, very poor. You can see some detail in the Boblov M7PRO, but it is definitely upscaled footage. And when you pause and look at it in detail, you do actually see that you've really got quite a difference in the sharpness. And let's just bring everything up to the same size. You can see that it's a lot more D-sharp on the Boblov M7PRO. So it definitely is not a 4K camera by any means, shape or form. Okay, here we go folks. It's the review of the Boblov M7PRO. What makes the Pro different apparently to the non-Pro version is you have coloured buttons on it. And apparently this one shoots in 4K, but not really. We'll get on to that. Okay, so first off, let's have a look at the box it comes in. So it comes in this nice little box, and it's got an instruction manual, which is actually quite well written for a change. Often with Chinese brand cameras, you know, the manuals are a little bit basic. And it does go through all the functions of how to use it. And what's different about this Boblov, as opposed to something like the T5, which I do like, but it's got a pretty crappy image, but still useful. What I like about this camera is you can go in and delete individual clips, and you can format the memory. And you couldn't do that on the T5. This one allows you to do it. Now, it also has this GPS function, which is kind of a bit awkward to use because you've got to use special software to kind of work out where you were at the time on the video. But nonetheless, it still does have that function if that's useful to you. I don't know how many people it will be useful to, but there you go. There's talk about using it in a car. Not really useful myself. I think you can probably get dedicated in-car dash cams for a lot cheaper than this, because this is retailing in the UK at about £159 at the moment. Yeah, but this is the thing, right? When you come to the specs up the back, This is the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway from this review should be this is not a 4K camera. It does not optically have a 4K sensor. And they tell you here that it actually has, where is it? I can't read. That's the display. There we go. 2 megapixel CMOS. See it at the top? Now a 2 megapixel CMOS is capable of producing 1600 by 1200. It's not even 1920 by 1080, so it's not even quite up to the 2K that the non-pro version shoots. Okay, so what you got to bear in mind is that everything this shoots is upscaled. So on the M7 non-pro, it's going to be 1600 by 1200 upscaled to 1920 by 1080. And on this version, it's 1600 by 1200 upscaled to 4K, which does look a bit bad. So what does this have, and is it worth getting versus something like this, the T5, which is much cheaper? Well, the quality of this in daytime is a little bit mushy, a bit washed out, low res. It'll get you by, but it's not very good. But where this excels, it's very good at night. It's sharp. You can read text on objects and things like that. It's got 8, there's 4 on this side and 4 on this side, emitters for the infrared. And it's not bad. It's pretty good image quality. The only thing I would say about the T5 is that it does have a slight vignetting, darkening towards the edges. So it's a little bit odd in that respect, but it has good audio pickup. And it's a pretty good night vision camera, which is what I really use it for. It's fairly waterproof as well. You see these like rubber things on it. And this has a removable battery. There you go. So you can pop batteries in and keep yourself going as long as you want. Now, what's the big difference between this one? He says as he can't get the battery thing back on. Oh, there we go. There we go. So what's the difference between this and this? Well, this claims to have a 15-hour record time. Now, it doesn't have a removable battery, and it doesn't have a removable SD card, but then neither did this. However, under the battery is a little plate, and you pull it off, there's a memory card slot. Well, guess what? A little hidden thing. See that plate there? Underneath it is an SD card, and you can take it out if you need to, but they don't tell you that in the manual. It's like, nope, this is 128 gigs and that's it. So what have you got up here? You've got 4 infrared emitters. You've also got a blue and red police siren thing, which I will demonstrate to you now by pressing the power button, waiting for it to power up. And as you'll notice, the clip does come across the screen quite a bit, so that makes it a little bit hard to see. You've got to hold it down like this if you want to read some of the information. Now, if I hold down the emergency button on the side, and you can have it without the noise, just with the lights, and you can turn it off as well. There we are. So, annoyingly, if you have the GPS function turned on, this little green light lights up the whole time. You can't turn it off. So if you turn off the GPS function, you can turn off the green light. Now, I like walking around being undetected, so I don't want a big green light. Another way around it would be to put a little piece of insulating tape over there, and that would kind of sort it out. I believe it has a light on it as well, but I can't remember how you get to it now. There is a way to turn a light on as well, I think. So the buttons are fairly self-explanatory. You hold down the power button to get the power. You've got audio record and infrared mode on or off. So you can manually turn the infrared mode on if you want to do it manually. I leave it set to auto in the menus because it's a lot easier. And on this side, you've got a record button. So if you hold that down or press it down, it'll record video. If you hold this one down, it records an audio memo. And if you press this one lightly, you get photos. And if you hold it down, you get the... Yeah, you get that. So that's what that button is. Now, where the T5 is not quite as friendly is to get into the menus, you have to hold down the side button and then use the up-down buttons on the side. Whereas this model here has buttons at the bottom. So to get into the menus, you can hold down the button, and it should, he says. But it's not doing it at the moment for some reason. Oh, there we are. So you get into the menus, which are ridiculously hard to see unless you take the clip off. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to slide the clip off, but there we go. So you've got your video resolutions, and it's a good menu system on this, by the way. So you can go into video resolution, and you can turn it from 3840 to 2160, 25560, 2304, 1920, and 720p. Now, bear in mind that you have to shoot in H.265 as the codec for 3840. Now, not everybody's machines are good at editing H.265. So if you want to be in H.264, the maximum resolution you can be in H.264 is 2560. But you can switch that to H.265 as well if you want. So anyway, image size, very misleading, says 40 megapixels. Now, how do they make a 40 megapixel photo from a 2 megapixel sensor? Yeah, you work that one out. They're not very good photos, by the way. The video coding can be H.265 or H.264. Bear in mind, 4K has to be H.265. Okay. The quality relates to the photos, whether you want fine, normal, or economy mode. Video pre-record functions, post-record, continuous shooting, GPS on and off, all fairly self-explanatory, which time zone you're in, loop recording, so that it will basically record to the end of the memory card, then start overwriting the earlier memory files. That's fairly standard. Video duration, you can have long, sort of chunks of 15 minutes per video clip, or 10 minutes or 5 minutes. They say it's safer to have it on the 5 minutes, because if something happens, then it doesn't lose all the video files for 15 minutes. But there we are. Motion detection, record the audio turned on or off, date stamp. Now, this is really useful because I've turned it off. Now, if you've got a T5, it records in the lower right-hand corner the date, the time, and a 8-digit ID and an 8-digit operator ID. So all of that information is down the bottom right and burnt into your image. And if you turn it on, then it will burn it into the image of this one. But I turn it off because I like using this for video. I'm not using it as a recording device as a security officer or a police officer. So I don't need that sort of information burnt in. So what are the other options then? If you go into the menus and you move across to the top and you go in, you've got power off time. You've got, do you want the beep sound? Do you want it Chinese or English? Do you want the infrared switch to be on manual or auto? I always have it on auto, so when it gets dark, it automatically does the right thing, because let's face it, you're going to end up forgetting to, gone out of the menus. You're going to end up going to forget to turn the IR on, and it's going to be like nighttime and you're not going to see anything. And then there's password protections as well. So you can protect the device from deletions and formatting by putting a password in there. So it means if you're giving these to like a security guard, he can't delete the footage, so he can't tamper with the footage. That has to be done by somebody who has the password. And then you've got your police ID and the device ID. These are the numbers which would appear in the lower right-hand corner, but can be quite annoying if that's recorded onto every single video. I don't like that myself. So I'm really glad that Boblov have finally giving you the option to turn that off. I always tend to blur that stuff out. Right, so also we got volume, date and time, and oh yes, that's the thing we've wanted for a long time. Just format the card, clear the card out so you can start recording. Just wipe the card. So those are the menus, and one big function of this is that it's got a 180-degree twisting lens, and it's got kind of clicks, but it does wobble about in those click areas, but it stays, it doesn't move, you know, wherever you put it, it does actually stay. It doesn't, however, tilt down, which I was surprised at and a little bit disappointed. You can get a teeny bit of time downward, but that's about it, not a lot. So it's mostly for filming upwards. So if you're walking around a building and you want to film ladders and windows and things like that, that might be useful. If you want to put it forwards, you can hold the camera like that and operate it like that, instead of having to operate it like that with the sensor forward. Plus also it will tilt back, which kind of makes it into a bit of a selfie camera almost. Hello, can you see us? Where are we? Can you see us? I don't know. Yeah, you probably can see us. And as you can see, well, it's gone into standby because I haven't touched any buttons. So let's just push a button, it brings it back on. But hello, there we go. There we are in the viewfinder. So it does actually then reorientate the image. When you turn it round enough, it flips. So yeah, there's the flip. Then it just flipped to the correct. So it knows which way this is orientated, so it will flip the image. There you go. There we go. So that's that. Right, so what I understand is there are menu buttons here. Obviously this is to get into the menus. There's a star button, and I believe that locks certain files from being deleted. So if they're an important file, you can press the star. And I'm not too sure about what this one does. Oh yeah, that takes you to playback mode, so you can play back photo, videos and audios. So you can select which type you want. And yeah, basically that is the rundown of this device. I mean, little things to note is, as I've said, the clip here, I've put this, this is an additional clip to actually lock it onto a garment of clothing. But the original clip, you can see here, it's metal, which is good because that'll make it a bit more sturdy. I don't like plastic, although it does have a plastic thing on the outside. It does cover the screen slightly, as you can see here, which is a little bit of a pain. But to be honest, as long as you see the device is on, you can see when it's recording, because if I press record now, it's in the top left. So ready, steady, go. You'll see that it starts flashing. So you can still see that underneath the clip. So the important things are, am I recording? Am I not recording? You know, and the battery is nicely visible down here. And none of this information is going to get recorded on the video file. It's only for display purposes here. So that's quite useful. So I'll stop recording and you can see it's not recording. I think, yeah, it actually flashes up here when it's recording as well. But I've got a funny feeling there's a silent mode. So if you go into the menus, now this is where it gets interesting because I've got to line it up again to be able to see what's going on. Now if I go into, I think it's the second menu, there's a silent mode. Oops, right. So there's a silent mode. And if you turn the silent mode on, and then you go back out, oops. Now silent mode, if you press record, which I'll do in a second, there. Now there's no noises and there's no lights. I got a feeling the silent mode turns off the GPS light as well. So if it does, then that's good. So it doesn't give away that you're recording. It doesn't make the flashing light. So that's what the silent mode is. Now the microphones appear to be underneath here. A little bit more muffled than the T5. The T5 has quite clear audio. This is a little bit more muffled, and it's definitely at a quieter level. Now, I guess they may have done this because the T5 might be clipping in loud environments like a pub or a nightclub. So they've probably done that for a reason. However, in software later on, you can boost the audio levels, but it will be a bit more muffled. So going back to this clip, I wanted to show you something with the clip. There is an adjuster here. You can actually twist this around so that you can have the clip at that angle. And that's the way it comes from the factory, which actually, if you look at it, doesn't really cover the screen very much. But let's face it, who would want to put the camera on sideways? Because the footage would be sideways. However, what you can do is you can change the position of this clip so that the camera will be upright even though the clip is sideways. So that would be useful for getting the clip to go on to something like a sideways, vertically hanging strap or something like that, or a belt, vertical belt rather than a horizontal belt on your waistline or a top pocket. So you can adjust this to meet the angle that you need. Now, one other function which is really good, because in the dark you might actually memorize what the buttons do, but a lot of people get a bit flustered and forget. So there's a big button on the front, and when you hold it down for a couple of seconds, it will start recording. It just fires it up and starts recording. So that's your get out of trouble, start recording button. And even if the device is off, it will turn on and start recording. Now, to show you how long that takes, I'll stop recording. Okay, I'm going to turn the Boblov off. Now, I'm going to push the button on the front, which is exactly the same as holding in the button on the side. It does the same thing. It will get you into record. So if I press the button, so 3, 2, 1, hold, press and hold. Okay. How long does it take to come on? 7, 8 seconds, 9 seconds, and you're recording. So from start up, 9 seconds approximately, till you get to record. I'll press that button on the front and it will stop the recording. So that's a nice function, that's a nice feature, because it saves you pressing the wrong button and not realizing that you're in record. That's the most important button you're ever going to need, is the record video button. And it will turn the device on from powered down. Now, you can have a voice on this, so when you hold the button down, it will actually say video recording started, and when you press stop, it'll say video recording stopped. So without even having to look at the screen, you can tell it's recording. But if you have it in the silent mode, you don't have any LEDs and you don't have any of that pop up either. Oh yeah, the long press that I did for the IR on and off, if you wanted manual IR, you long press. If you press it quickly, if you press it quickly, it turns on a white LED, which can be used like a torch. So if you press it again, it turns it off. So white LED on and off. The other side is hold the button down, you get the, well, you should. No, should be the red, no. So this is the thing, sometimes it doesn't behave like you expect it to. Yeah, now it should be on the sirens there, but I think it's because it's in silent mode, it will not let you accidentally turn on, it won't let you turn on the police lights accidentally when you're in silent mode. And that's to make sure you don't give away your presence accidentally by pushing the wrong button. So I've taken silent mode off now. Okay, so if we go back out, now if I hold down the button, there we are. So it doesn't let you come out with the red and blue flashing lights and the sound if you're in the silent mode. So that's to protect you. So apart from the little reset button, which if you get the brain goes a bit crazy, if you press the reset button, it'll go back to defaults and it will go back to 2600 recording mode as a default. But apart from that, that's the basic functions of this unit. There is not much else I can think that we haven't covered. It's just down to the quality now. And I think Boblov I've actually been a little bit, I'll choose my words carefully here, a little, yeah, they've been a little bit creative with this, saying it's a 4K device, because it's not. It's subpar 2K. Let's turn him off. So you hold the button in for a couple of seconds and it'll go to sleep. So power off, come on. There we go. So yeah, what you have is something that you have to keep charged. It's going to run for about 15 hours. It doesn't have a replaceable battery, so if the battery starts to go, you are going to have a slightly dying device at that point. You can secretly change the memory card, although I don't know what the compatibility is like for bigger memory cards, but it is there. They have introduced a USB-C charging port, which is a lot easier because Type-C is what most phones use now, so it's going to be the one that you're going to have most handy. If you do plug this into a computer, it's really easy to get into the files and pull the files off on a Mac or a PC. However, even though they've introduced the USB-C charging port, it's USB 2 transfer speeds. So don't expect big transfer speeds from this port, still USB 2. There are no TV outs, whereas the T5 has a HDMI out. But it has the oldest type of charge port, so you have to make sure you've got one of those cables there. But this has TV out, so you could plug it in to a TV and view the files and play them back and whatever. This has no TV out, so the only way you're going to view the files on this is to take them off onto a computer and do it that way. Now, the quality. It's a lot better in the daytime than the T5. But at night time, it's slightly subpar the T5, which kind of tells me that the sensor in this is better really at night than this. And it doesn't really make much difference, the fact that you've got more infrared light. It's the actual quality of the image. This one is slightly out of focus. This one is nice and sharp. It doesn't mean you won't get to see what you need to see. You will be able to see stuff, but it's not going to be superb. And the funny thing is, 2K recording in this is 11 kilobits per second, or meg, I can't remember, but it's 11. 2K recording on this, they took it down to 5. So half the data rate of this in 2K. Well, that's going to make that a more scrubby quality, and if you move quickly, the image is going to break up slightly, and it does. Okay, so the 2K on this is about reasonable for the video quality. 2K on this, 5K kilobits per second? Nah, it's not very good. So, what do they give the 4K? Well, they give that 11. But as anyone will tell you, 2K fits into a 4K image 4 times. There are 4 2K images in a 4K image. So you'd imagine that this would have taken it up to being 20 megabits or 20 kilobits per second to 30 or 40 to be able to record a decent quality 4K image. But it isn't a 4K sensor. It's a subpar 2K sensor, but it's recording 4-bit files, so it's upscaling. It's upscaling this footage, which is going to slightly blur the footage out because, of course, you take a pixel, you double it or triple it or quadruple the size, and it's going to blur it. So it's a 4K container file with a sub 2K image quality. Now that is where I think that Boblov should actually be very open and transparent about this and tell you that this device is in fact a sub 2K sensor with a 4K recording container, because that is exactly what this camera is. And I'm going to show you the footage now to make it very clear what is going on with the sensor. So in the left you can see a full 4K camera, which is a Sony AX100. The Boblov T5 looking very, very milky in the middle, and the Boblov M7PRO on the right hand side. It doesn't look too bad when viewed from a distance, but when you pixel peep, have a look now at what happens with the quality. And you really need to do these tests looking at it on a 4K screen, but zoomed in here you should be able to see the general quality is very, very fuzzy on the M7PRO. And if you look at the TV antenna and the chimney, you can definitely see the difference in quality. And zoom in a bit more just to kind of make them exactly the same size. You can see that the M7PRO versus the true Sony 4K camera, you can really tell this is upsampled 4K video on the Boblov M7PRO. And if you take photos with the M7PRO, you can see the quality is quite bitty on the right hand side versus a true 50 megapixel photo taken on my phone, which is on the left hand side, versus the Boblov M7PRO on the right hand side. So there's definitely a lot of artistic license in calling this a 4K 40 megapixel camera when the manual and the specs actually tell you directly it's a 2 megapixel. So yeah, I think Boblov need to actually state this clearly so they don't get complaints about this. But you know, it's still better than the T5. It's a lot better than the T5. So you know, for all intents and purposes, you may be happy with this camera. And I've got a very nice Sony 4K camera, but this is true 4K. And 4,000 pixels across, or 3840 by 2160. And you can see there is absolutely no comparison between this, which is sub 2K, and a 4K camera. The image quality is just night and day. So if you're buying this expecting 4K quality, you're going to be disappointed. It is not 4K. The quality is sub 2K. However, it is better than the T5. The image quality is heaps better than the T5. If you own a GoPro and you put them side by side recording, the GoPro will record true 4K, this thing sub 2K. It just isn't capable of doing it. Now the big thing is, will I hold on to it? Because it didn't do what it said it was going to do. It was slightly misleading on the specs, but am I going to keep it? And am I going to use it? Well, must be said, being able to format and delete the files on here is a definite plus. Being able to delete individual files, a definite plus. The image quality for daytime capture is still heaps better than the T5. So it is an improvement. However, the M7PRO is really bad at night, so keep watching to the end to see all the examples. Which is not something I really am happy to know about. And I think a lot of the problems with some of the image quality is to do the low data rate that they're using to try and record in 4K, which it's, as we know, it's not actually 4K, but they're using a very low bit rate. So I'm hoping that Boblov will come out with a firmware update. So in the image codec area, they should have H.264 low quality and H.264 high quality and H.265 low quality and H.265 high quality in order to increase the bit rate. Because quality is more important to some of us than having 8 hours record time. Okay, some of us want to have a good quality image. Isn't that the whole reason we bought a 4K camera, is because we're concerned with the image quality? So to give a low data rate, wow, not the most sensible of approaches to designing this camera, in my humble opinion. Am I going to keep it? Well, sadly, no, I'm not keeping it, and here's the reason why. Because it's okay for daylight use, but sadly, it's not as good as the T5 for nighttime use. And I shot most of this video before I'd done my infrared tests at night, and once I'd done those tests, the difference is quite shocking actually. So here, let's have a look. So this is on the Boblov M7 Pro. As you can see, there's a lot of kind of image scatter, but when you move quickly, you can see the blocking that starts appearing because of the low data rate, and definitely appears very distinctly when you move quickly. Here's another frame hold on the footage, and you can see it breaks up into these horrible little squares. Now there's nothing you can do to recover from this. It just looks very ugly, and it's all to do with the fact there's just a crazy low bit rate that's been used for this container 4K codec. So here's another example whereby I am moving the camera to test what it's like in motion, and you can really see some very bizarre artifacts which are just basically horrible noise. And that's all to do with the data rate. You know, this data rate is falling apart when trying to record the 4K, and something really needs to be done about this to produce a high quality data rate. So here you can see at 200% zoom, those pixels are really big, and there's just all this kind of random noise which doesn't really bear thinking about. But here we are, this is not zoomed in, the same bit of footage. You can just see a lot of noise introduced into anything that's dark, and just nice big chunky square horrible pixels of just noise. And a lot of this is because the data rate is so low. So there you go, folks. What do you think? It's the NOT4k 4K camera. So this is taken at twilight, about 20 minutes after sunset, and that flickering settles down. That's the T5, and you can see that it's, you know, reasonably sharp. And then we've got the Boblov M7PRO, which is a bit sharper, a bit brighter, but don't let that fool you, because this is twilight and there's enough light to meet the sensor, and it's looking okay in this light. So here in this piece of footage, you can see that the T5 on the left is producing quite nice greys. It's a little bit more out of focus, a bit more fuzzy if you want. However, the detail being represented by greys is more pure in the T5, whereas on the M7PRO it's over sharpened, and you can kind of see that there's a lot more noise which is very apparent. So in the grey areas, especially if they're dark, you're just getting horrible noise. Let's slow it down so you can see this a bit better. This is zoomed in at 200%, by the way. So when you start to slow it down, you can really see what's going on a lot better. The T5 footage holds up under movement. The M7PRO breaks up a lot and just introduces noises into the areas where there should be grey. So the T5, although it's a little bit fuzzier, it's actually, I think it stands up as a better image. And nowhere does this become more apparent than when you are actually in complete darkness, in which case the M7's sharpness that you're seeing here completely disappears, and it's no longer the sharper camera, and it's no longer the brighter camera. When the light is gone, then the T5 takes over and is a much, much better image, as you're just about to see. So this next test is in complete darkness, only using the infrared lights, but both sets of cameras are both projecting their infrared lights. So you've got 8 lights on the T5 plus the 4 lights on the M7PRO. So both of these lights are adding up together, so it's a slightly brighter infrared scene. So now you can see the T5, which is always represented by the data that you can't remove in the lower right hand corner. And you've got nice greys and nice blacks and nice whites, and even though it looks a bit fuzzy, you are able to see detail in the greys. So that's important, because when you switch over to the M7PRO, as I will in a second, you're going to see just a whole load of noise in the grey. So let's replay the sequence again, but from the M7 perspective. So this is the M7 now, and you can see that a lot of the grey areas, and especially the dark areas, are just now a maze of noise. So the shapes are much harder to make out, and the edges of things that are dark are much harder to make out. And bear in mind, this is with all of the infrared lights on. So the M7 will start to suffer when we just use its own infrared lights without the T5 adding to it. Now, just slowed down so you can see a little bit easier. This is the T5 again, slowed down, and you can see that the greys are actually more solid greys rather than being grey with a load of noise in it. So let's switch across to the M7 Pro. And this is the M7 Pro, and as you can see, slowed down, you can see all of that moving noise. It's moving around like ants, and it's quite horrific, and it actually takes away the detail from things like the leaves in the tree. So we will zoom in on this in a minute to show you exactly the effect we're getting. But yeah, it's just a mush of noise at this point, and this is with a lot of lights on. So now we switch to side by side, and you really get to see that the T5, even though it's a little bit fuzzier, blurrier, that actually helps to create nice grayscales, nice detail in the dark grey areas, whereas there's just a hell of a lot of noise around the sides of objects that would have given up detail, would have resolved detail, but aren't really able to do it very well. So yeah, here we are at 10% speed, and look at the leaves on the trees. They're just noise, and on the T5 on the left you can see that they're actually holding steady, and you can actually see more of the shapes, whereas the highly sharpened, highly noisy M7 Pro really isn't adding to any detail. It's actually, the noise is subtracting from the detail, if you ask me. And yeah, I mean, where this comes into play a hell of a lot is if you try to actually then brighten using your editing software. If you brighten it up, see what happens to the T5 on the left versus the M7 on the right, as we'll just do now. So now we're starting to ramp up the exposure to 2.4 on the left and right, and you can see what happens is that there's still a lot more detail in the highlights, and the highlights can be pulled down, but the exposure is now a lot nicer on the T5, and all you're really seeing is just squarey pixelated noise in the M7 Pro on the right. So it's just a whole mess of noise on the fence panels. You can see it's just noise, 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 whereas the T5 holds up a hell of a lot better, which is surprising because it is a cheaper camera, but it does seem to work better in dark conditions without this horrible noise. So now we're using just individual cameras with their own lights on, not the whole added together. So this is just the T5 on, filming on its own with its own lights. And you can see quite far into the distance. This is the important point. You can see the house. You can see the house roof in the top right. And you can see the edge of the garden at the back. Now, it's a lot darker at the back with the M7 Pro, but it does only have 4 lights. But you're not really seeing the roof of the house in the distance. Everything disappears into the black, and everything's a lot more noisy. So it's hard to compare like for like, side by side, because the cameras weren't actually filming at the same time, but I'll attempt to do that now and slow things down so you can see the quality difference. So I've frozen the shots here so you can actually get a chance to scan the image, and what you can see is the cross, which is in the scene, is essentially a lot nicer to look at in the T5. No grain. It's quite grainy and almost looks like the edges aren't really as sharp in the M7 Pro. Looking into the distance, into the area where the little garden gate is, and you can see the 2 posts. Well, the T5 sees it better, but it does have more infrared lights. It has double the infrared lights, but it's seeing it better. Also, if you look at the grass area, then that clearly shows that you're getting more grey and more detail in the grey in the T5, and the M7 is just nothing but noise. So the grey is kind of reduced to noise as opposed to solid greys. Now if we lighten the brightness up, you'll see a lot more detail in the T5 than the M Pro. Let's do that now. So now, as you see, I've extremely enhanced the exposure to 5 times the exposure on the T5 and the M7 Pro. I brought the highlights down as well and the white down as well, just to, you know, try and give it the best chance to see. And what you can tell then is there is nice gradation through the greys. You can see there's nice grading, nice smooth, you know, different levels of grey in the T5, whereas the M7 Pro, because it's not really trying to draw greys, it's just noise, it doesn't recover any grey. And on the T5 on the left, you can see the distant trees are now starting to show up, whereas on the M7 Pro, no sign of the distant trees at all. In fact, the gate posts, as you can see, really do look a lot better in the T5. Absolutely amazing difference there, and you really can see now why I think the T5 is far superior as an infrared camera at night than the M7 Pro. So yeah, a lot of pixelization in the M7 Pro as well. You can see nasty pixels, and all of that seems to be kind of like noise cleaned and smoothed in the T5. So the T5 is a hell of a lot more useful. Now I'm going to do the exact same test but with all the lights on for both cameras, and I will show you side by side, you know, which cameras are looking better with maximum lights from both. So here we are. Now all the infrared lights on both cameras are on. The images are exactly matched and shot at exactly the same time, but you can see here that, and this is at 100% by the way, this is not zoomed in. Okay, you can see that the T5 on the left is showing greys, nice shades of grey, so is actually showing you a cleaner image where you can make out the objects better. And the M7 Pro on the right, if you look at the trees, they're just not really defined, and there's not so much grey there. It's more sort of either it's illuminated or it's actually just mush. Now if you look over at the house, you can actually see the grey of the house. Now this is a very telling thing because we've got both sets of lights on both cameras, but you can actually see the grey on the side of the house in the left-hand image on the T5. So the roof of the house and the grey of the side of the house. And look what happens in the B7 Pro on the right-hand side. You cannot see the grey on the side of the house. It definitely seems like it's a less sensitive sensor on the B7, the M7 Pro. So there's definitely a lot more light getting in to the T5, and it's definitely a more sensitive image. And of course, I think it's probably obvious to all of you that are looking at this that the noise is just crazy. I mean, what are all these shapes and, you know, what's all that shape stuff going on? You know, there's just like big blocky squares of unusual shapes that don't seem to have anything to do with the image whatsoever in the B7, the M7 Pro on the right hand side versus a much cleaner image, you know, no noise on the T5, and that's very apparent as well in the fence. I mean, look at the noise in the fence. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy, and the T5 is just doing a much better job. So yes, sadly, after looking at the night tests, even though it's a good camera in the day, the M7 Pro's okay in the day, but it isn't 4K, which is a bit sad. It really goes to absolute pot at night. And believe it or not, I buy these cameras for night use pretty much exclusively because I shoot on a Pocket 2 from DJI. When I put my torch lights on, that's what I use to shoot with. And then I just use the infrared functions of these cameras exclusively for infrared, just to fill in the blank when we're walking around in the dark. And I cannot have the quality of the M7 Pro like that, you know, at night. It's just a real step down for me to go from the T5. So unfortunately, I'm going to send the M7 Pro back because it's no good for me. If you shoot in the daytime, the M7 Pro is going to be a much better camera than the T5 for you. But once you get into night, it's really going to break up. So it depends what you want to do with the footage. I edit my T5 footage into my YouTube videos, so I don't really want to have that kind of noise present in the stuff that I'm shooting. I really need it to be clean, you know, and I don't want to have to be doing like neat video noise cleaning, which takes absolutely forever to run on the footage that I'm getting. So yeah, there you go. I mean, your eyes don't lie, and yeah, there's definitely a lot of creative license in saying this is a 4K camera. I really do hope that Boblov actually sorts something out with the bit rates, release a firmware to increase the bit rates, because it's just like crazy time at the moment. There's no way you can film at night with the M7 Pro, in my humble opinion. And I was not paid for this review. I'm sorry that if it upsets Boblov to hear the acid truth on this, but yeah, this camera, for the money that's being asked, I think it needs to deliver on the infrared. Otherwise, why include it at all? My suggestions would be put, you know, a lot more infrared lights on the camera for nighttime use. If you're going to use that sensor, you really need to like pump some crazy amounts of infrared light in to get that camera, with the way it's set up at the moment, to be able to produce an image. And I still think you have to do something about the bit rate in order to clean it up. So anyway, from a man wearing his dressing gown finishing this video on a Sunday morning, yeah, it's time for me to go, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you don't like it, click like. If you like it, click dislike. If you hate it, unsubscribe. Well, subscribe, and then yeah, whatever, you know. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.